Hi everyone, it's Kute here, sending you big love right now. Hope you can feel it wherever you are coming through. Today I want to make a short video blog about suffering. You know, we've all experienced that horrible feeling that creates a certain contraction in our being that clouds our vibrancy and joy. It's that feeling of suffering. And somehow, many of us, we go through life like suffering is a mandatory part of life. Well, here's the first thing. Number one, suffering is not mandatory. You do not have to suffer. And often we project, what I've noticed is we project the source of our suffering on external things out there, on your spouse, on your child, on the economy, on the government. They are making me suffer. And the other thing we have to remember is nothing outside of ourselves is making us suffer. What's making us suffer is the meaning we're giving situations, the meaning we're giving what was said to us, the meaning we're giving the things that are occurring in our lives, and what we're doing inside of here and within ourselves that is creating our interpretation of reality that is making us suffer. Nothing outside. In order to shift our relationship with suffering, we first have to give that up. So what's your relationship with suffering? For the longest time, I somehow thought, right, that in order to be spiritual, maybe you have this paradigm, it's time to blow up this paradigm. In order to be spiritual, you have to suffer. That you can't suffer we can't be spiritual and enlightened and free and transformed without suffering. I believe that it's a complete hogwash. It's a complete illusion. It's a complete lie. That suffering is not a sign of spirituality. It has nothing to do with spirituality. You know, I thought like, oh, the more I suffer, the more the harder things are, the harder the meditation, the harder the adventure, the harder the journey. Like somehow that was a sign of my spiritual evolution. The poorer I am, then, you know, if I could just like, you know, take this cord, or I'm holding an iPhone cord, and then just whip myself like I'm gonna go to heaven, like I'm definitely gonna get enlightened. There is nothing, let's just get this clear. If you're someone that's been holding on to consciously or unconsciously the idea that suffering is intertwined with spirituality, I invite you today, right now, to make a shift within yourself, to shift the association and realize that spirituality and being spiritual has nothing to do with suffering. Pain is a part of life. Someone dies, it's painful. There's pain all the time. Heartbreak, there is pain. But suffering is everything we do to ourselves and everything we add to the meaning of an experience. There's a few reasons as to why I've seen people suffer. One of the things as to why we suffer is when we're constantly resisting reality, something occurs and we're resisting it. And if you're in a moment of suffering, if you check where your attention is, ask yourself the question, you'll see that your attention is often fixated on this question, on this focus, on this paradigm. It's likely what's going on in your mind in that moment of suffering is this thought. The experience that I'm having is not the experience that I should be having. This experience is not the experience I should be having. I should be having some other experience than I should be having right now. Instant recipe for suffering. If you wake up happy one day in the morning and you decide you would like to feel a dose of suffering, just start resisting the hell out of your reality. This shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be that way. That shouldn't be that way. My spouse shouldn't be this way. My cat shouldn't be this way. You will suffer instantly. Instantly, I promise and guarantee you. You know, the other thing that I've seen as to what causes suffering is when we are either when our attention is hijacked and it's fixated on the past, or we are projecting into the future, often creating a negative future fantasy about stuff in our life that hasn't yet happened, but might possibly happen, could possibly happen, maybe might happen, but hasn't occurred yet, and likely 90% of the time will never happen. I mean, how many times have you and I projected into the future and made up all sorts of crazy making scenarios about stuff that might happen? But yeah, you know, if you think about it, an alien could come from the sky right now and carry you to the planet Plugonatron, right? I mean, anything is possible. So in order to shift that pattern, that way of thinking, you have to become conscious and aware of where your attention is at. When you're feeling suffering, how will you know you're feeling suffering? You're often feeling suffering because there is a level of either physical pain, you will feel physical pain, emotional pain, that will then be tinged with laced with struggle, laced with all of your interpretations that create the feeling of suffering. And that's how you know, because you'll feel pain. You'll feel a ripple within your field, a ripple within your flow. The other thing that creates a sense of suffering is, one thing I've observed, is when we're constantly obsessed with ourselves. Constantly obsessed with ourselves. All of our attention is fixated on my issue, my problem, my pain, my pattern, my past, my trauma, my stuff, my shit, whatever it is. When your attention is constantly obsessed with yourself, when you're obsessing with yourself, when you're obsessing with yourself, when you're obsessing with yourself, the end result is suffering. Because many things, what you have to start realizing is, as you become more awake, become more conscious, become more aware, you start realizing that your persona, that your personality, that all of the fears, the stories, the illusions, the judgments about yourself that you are making to be real, that seem real, that you're taking so seriously in that moment and obsessing on, that's that now causing suffering for you, isn't actually that real. That none of those things that you're thinking that you are and obsessing about in that moment are actually who you really are. What you are is whole, perfect, and complete. So as you start observing, again, it goes back to observing where is my attention right now? One of the most powerful questions I learned to ask myself was, where is my attention right now? Boom. Brings you in the present moment, because often when you're in a moment of suffering, likely if you become conscious and present, you'll realize that you were in a trance and your attention wasn't here in this moment right now, breathing, connected to your body, connected to yourself. You were floating somewhere else, future, past, within yourself, lost in a story, not in current relationship with reality of what is. Buying into the thoughts, buying into the emotions, indulging. We often indulge so much of our BS, so much of our mind, so much. We often indulge the negative feeling, the suffering. And one of the things I've seen, and I used to be really guilty of this many years ago, one of the things I've seen is that we start, we get addicted to suffering. Sometimes we don't even know that we're suffering, because that's all that we know, and we get addicted to suffering because it feels comfortable. Either it feels comfortable, so we keep doing it, or through suffering we get this emotional reaction within ourselves that then gives us a sense of feeling alive, or in suffering we feel a sense of pain and it hurts us physically, mentally, emotionally, and what that does is it tends to reinforce the sense that I'm here, that was painful, I'm here. And it's a way of reinforcing our own ego sense of ego structure, which is also what we get out of suffering. And sometimes, through this whole pattern of being lost and indulging suffering, it's a way that we get validation, love, approval, attention. If you have been running a pattern of suffering, just take a look at where your attention is at, but also I invite you to ask yourself the question, what have you been getting out of your suffering? What is it that you've been getting out of staying locked in your suffering? Sometimes we indulge our suffering, and I've seen this with many of my clients. We indulge our suffering, we indulge it, and we get lost in it, and we just wallow in it. We luxuriate in the suffering, because then when we're stuck in a pattern of suffering, we don't actually have to do anything about our situation. We don't actually have to be responsible for what actions am I going to take, and be really responsible for going for your dreams, being really responsible for taking your life to the next level, being responsible for taking the next action step. So ask yourself, what are the payoffs that you've been getting out of suffering? Today I invite you, my friends, to make a decision and give up your suffering pattern. Recognize that suffering is not mandatory. There is nothing spiritual about suffering. It's not holy, it's not enlightened, it's not going to get you to heaven or enlightenment any more quickly. You know, there is nothing spiritual about it. Set yourself free today. Give yourself permission to feel joy, bliss, and beauty. And look around and realize that life is constantly in celebration. That the sun blooms and the moon shines and the flowers dance and the oceans, smile. All of existence is celebrating you, celebrating itself moment to moment to moment, in spite of the difficulties, in spite of the challenges, in spite of it all. Look around. This universe, this life that we live is a crazy, wild, and amazing celebration. And if we can't find some joy and blissfulness in this whole party called life, then where else are we going to find it? It ain't perfect, but it sure as hell is amazing. And we get one chance at this thing called life. So I invite you, my friends, give up suffering, kiss more, dance more, make love more, laugh more, and love fully. If you enjoyed this video blog today, I invite you to surrender and give up suffering completely. Embrace the beauty of life. I ask you to share this video with your friends. Sign up for my blog and you'll receive weekly inspiration and updates from me. Love now.